Hello folks, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm here to be talking about all the books that I read back in September, as well as going through my October, potentially November TBR, as I've been kind of getting through a lot of the books, as you'll see in a minute, that I had planned out for this autumnal season. So kind of need to replenish it. It is very over ambitious, but you know, it can carry me into the winter as well. Anyway, as we are here, let's get started with the books that I finished in September. So the first novel I finished was You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry. This was also a NetGalley arc that I had, but I read it via the physical edition, which I recently picked up and added to my collection. So I think I'm going to be doing what I did in last month's wrap up and kind of put all the information on the screen and just speak by giving you, I just give you my review by speaking. So a bit busy on the screen, feel free to pause if you'd like to. I'll give you the synopsis at the side, some information about publication dates, genres, that sort of thing. So this one was an absolute joy to read. I had read Beach Read prior to this, I think last year, really enjoyed it, and I'm so glad to have enjoyed this one as well. I feel like it was such a real depiction of friends to lovers, and it cultivated this feeling of both real life but also escapism. Like, it was just enough different to everyday life for me to feel like I was escaping everyday life, you know, without the fantasy that I tend to read. It was sort of still on that cusp of reality that I didn't want to escape. I wasn't running from anything, I just wanted to zone out a little bit, and this book did that for me. One of our love interests, Alex, he has my whole heart. An adorable human being. I absolutely adored him as a character. I loved how his main trait was how selfless he was, but also enjoyed that it wasn't at a discredit to himself. Like, he didn't do it in a way that ended up making him like super vulnerable or anything like that. He still knew, I feel, his own worth and wouldn't take any crap, basically. So I appreciated that, and it was nice to see that you can be both. You can give your heart but also guard it, you know. I also really enjoyed how real all the inside jokes felt. Sometimes I feel like, you know, when you've got this realism thing going on and these characters are having banter with each other and they're having these conversations, it doesn't feel real. Like, there's this kind of disconnect between what's going on. You're reading the words, you're seeing what's happening, but it just doesn't have a connection. But the whole relationship between Poppy and Alex was just top notch. The jokes, everything, it made me feel like I was in on it, and I loved that feeling. So yeah, this one was a 5 out of 5 stars. After that, I picked up Only a Monster by Vanessa Len. This one I've actually done a full review on, so if you're interested in my review for this one, go ahead and check out the link in the cards. But for now, I'm just going to pop this to the side and carry on with the next book. Next up is the beginning of my audiobook kick again, and that started off with To Be a Gay Man by Will Young, read by the author. So I absolutely adored Will Young as a singer when he first came onto the scene. I remember watching him, or I think I remember watching him on the, was it Pop Idol or something, on that. And yeah, I enjoyed his music, although I haven't listened to him in quite some time. But I thought this was a fantastic memoir, learning about how his struggles affected him with his gay shame, his porn addiction, the media, and how all of that just kind of built up and up and up and affected him entirely. I enjoyed hearing how he helped himself though and sought external help for the issues that he was facing, especially in combating his internalized shame and homophobia, basically. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. It was a really short read. It was like 4 hours to listen to, and I listened to things on like double speed pretty much, so 2 hours pretty much. Yeah, I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I listened to The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury, and I read this through YouTube. So I listened to this channel that I found called Ramble Reads ASMR. They've recently put up some more videos, which is really exciting. So yeah, this one was a lot of fun. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I had previously read only one book by Ray Bradbury before, and that was Something Wicked This Way Comes, and I really enjoyed this. So in comparison, I would say that Something Wicked This Way Comes I loved so much more, but this one I still very much enjoyed. It was a really cool experience and super relaxing, particularly listening to this specific reading of it. Rainbow Reads ASMR had this really nice kind of, I don't know, it just felt crackly and sort of like one of those ambience rooms that you see sometimes on YouTube that I don't know why I said sometimes, that's a genre on YouTube. It was sort of that mixed with reading and ASMR, and it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. Time travel element in this one I felt worked really well, and I often find it's something that can be quite difficult to achieve, especially coming off the back of Only a Monster, which had a similar element and I don't think did nearly as well as this one. I'll probably benefit from a reread, and physically at that, just because I picked this up because I wanted to relax and kind of unwind and drift off, and listen to it mainly for a relaxation purposes. So I know there's some plot points that I wasn't really super paying attention to and might have drifted off to. So yeah, I think it'd probably be best if I sit down and read this again in the future to get all that I need to get from it. But yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. The boys were catching fire with the idea. It made all the give go out of their joints and put a little dust of sin in their blood. Next up, I have my first Book Sirens e-arc, and unfortunately I really tried with this one, but it was a DNF at 41%, which I think is a good amount of time that I've put into it. I don't star rate DNFs, but I do leave a review of why I DNF'd it, what worked for me, what didn't work for me, and ultimately the reasons why I didn't continue. And I don't even know if I want to talk about the book at this point. I just kind of want to briefly talk about my experience with the author. So I had written my review, my original review, and I posted it how I would normally, and I just expressed that there were some issues, and I briefly went into what those issues were. There were some stereotypes, like racial stereotypes, that I just didn't enjoy, and I felt were too much too often for me to think, oh, that's just a coincidence. It stuck out glaringly to me. So I pointed that out in my review, but nothing was hateful, harmful or untrue. It was all part of my reading experience. Anyway, I got a message from the author reaching out to me through Instagram, and I thought, oh, that's strange, let me open it and see what she has to say anyway. And it was really nice at first until it wasn't. They basically were like chatting to me, and they were like, oh no, what have I done, like, can you please just talk me through your review, like point out what you found issue with. And I was happy to do so, because you can't really have a conversation on Book Sirens. I'm still very new to that that website, but you can't, it doesn't look like you can communicate with them. So they saw my social media and reached out via that way, which I guess is fine. And yeah, it turned out in the end that they wanted me to change my review. Anyway, me being naive, gullible and a people pleaser, I was like, I feel uncomfortable changing it, but I will make an edit and I'll make note that I have edited it. But I screenshotted my original review and then screenshotted the edited part, and then I messaged Book Sirens and I asked them, like, is this normal, is this something that authors would do? And anyway, I had edited it, I'd left it, blah blah blah. Bear in mind, I was having most of this conversation on my birthday with them, so I didn't really need to be talking to them whilst I was celebrating living my life, you know. And it got to the point where they sent me a message basically saying they were going to flag my review if I didn't edit it in a timely manner to them, which was 1, threatening and rude. 2, I'd already edited it, which I didn't need to do, but did anyway because I didn't want to make them feel uncomfortable, in a way that still felt honest enough. It just removed part of the example of why I was uncomfortable with what I was uncomfortable with. And 3, they acknowledged that it takes 24 hours for a review to be edited anyway and like come up anyway. So I'd already edited it, and they'd already, like, they didn't take into acknowledgement that you're not going to see it even if I have edited it for another 24 hours. And it was just a really snarky response, and I wasn't going to come on here and be like all arsey about it, but it really pissed me off, I'm not going to lie. Like, after I got my confirmation from Book Sirens, like, this is not how we sort of condone a relationship with authors, like it's out of the ordinary, you're well within your rights to put your review back to the original, you don't owe them anything, you don't owe them even to respond to their messages if they reach out to you privately. After all that and that kind of confirmation, and validation, I was like, nah, I'm not about this. I don't like how you've responded to me. I was not unjust, I was not rude, I was not slanderous, nothing like that, and I'm not going to have any more correspondence with you. And then I blocked them. So yeah, wasn't a nice experience. Hopefully this doesn't come back to bite me in the arse, but I don't even really want to talk about the my reasonings for DNFing and what worked and what didn't work, because that whole experience was just strange. And then it threw me off even more, because after all this situation, they liked my Goodreads review, which was the edited one. I've still not changed it because I don't even want to look at it anymore, to be honest. But yeah, it wasn't a nice experience. So now I'm like really super alert. I've had a couple of authors reach out since then, and like agents and stuff, and I'm like kind of really vetting and asking. I'm like, how do you respond if you don't get a favourable review? Because, you know, you've got to keep these things professional, and this response here in this video probably isn't very professional, but I'm like, nah, be aware. Some authors get really, really snarky and really rude, and I don't know, if they don't get their own way, I don't know. Anyway, shall we move on? Let's go on to Riot Baby. I felt like I was a bit of a Riot Baby there. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars, and it's by Tochi Onibuchi. I read War Girls a couple of years ago. I haven't read the sequel, which was, is it Rebel Sisters or something like that? I haven't read the sequel yet. This one was so good. It made me feel so much, a range of emotions that you could describe, all of it in this one being, if you can imagine. I loved how this premise was just outside our reality, but it wasn't like a full-blown fantasy. It was kind of dystopian in some ways, not necessarily with, did it have technology? Not like sci-fi dystopian. There were some things that were different to our time. I don't know how to describe it, but it was just outside our reality, basically. There were some powerful conversations on grief, black anger, police brutality, generational trauma. Oh my god, it was amazing the way the conversations were handled, especially between the siblings, like these two main characters. Phenomenal. And lastly, my favourite thing was that it had some complex and well thought out family dynamics. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars from me. Right, that was an ebook, by the way, just in case you want to know. It was one of Tor's 3 ebooks of the month, I do believe. One of the early ones that they that I had subscribed to the newsletter for, when I realised that was a thing that they did. So the next book is a 5 out of 5 star, and that is I Heard What You Said by Jeffrey Boakye, and this one I listened as an audiobook. It was read by the author too, which I always enjoy. So everything about this honestly was just spot on. It really hit the nail on the head. I really felt seen when Boakye talked about specific things such as, where are you from? No, really, where are you from? You're posh, implying you're posh for a black person, even though you're just well spoken just generally, and keeping different facets of your life separate. I don't know why, but as a youngster I'd always like feel uncomfortable when my family mingled with my friends. Not for any reason of shame or anything, it just felt weird. Like whenever I'd have my little McDonald's birthday parties, I'd feel weird having my school friends and my little cousins together. It just, two parts of my world that felt like it shouldn't mix. And the way he discussed this just absolutely perfectly encapsulated that feeling that I had. That was such a strange feeling. I mean, it's pretty much dissipated now, but such a strange feeling I had for such a long time. I don't know, he just got it spot on, and I was not expecting that. Honestly, I think it is a must read for all educators and just anyone in general, to be honest. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. But I have a quote here, and this one is, to say you don't see colour is to say that you don't see me. It's about your comfort, not mine. Alright, next up, I found myself back in the magical, peculiar world of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and this was book 5, I think, the 5th novel, The Conference of the Birds by Ransom Riggs. This is probably going to keep going out of focus because it keeps like focusing on the shiny picture of a person. So yeah, oh my god, being back in this world after a couple of years, it was so easy to get back into. There were some things that I definitely probably would have done well having rehashed over it, just watching some spoiler reviews or something, but I wasn't super lost, and any kind of lost that I was, it wasn't for very long. So yeah, it was nice to fall back into this. I just flew through it, like, no pun intended. Really loved seeing Noor, who was a character that was kind of introduced in the previous book, really settling in this story, especially getting acquainted with the other peculiar children. I liked seeing the kind of relationship and characteristics grow between Noor and Jacob, and then Noor and Jacob with the peculiar children, because it's such a different dynamic when it's just you two on your own running for your life, and then you're with all these people all of a sudden, and you've got to learn this whole new world, this whole new system, and you're also very new to being peculiar yourself. So yeah, I adored this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and the quote I've chosen for this one is, "It was the second time in 3 days that I'd taken up space normally reserved for a dead body. It seemed like the universe was trying to tell me something, and not in a terribly subtle way." Next up, I dived back into The Sandman with Volume 4, Season of the Mist, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. This is by Neil Gaiman and a plethora of creators, you know, artists, what do you call them, not lyricists, the people that do the art, not the art, the writing, you know what I mean. A lot of people involved in this one, as they usually are. So I love the focus of hell in this one, and the inhabitants as well. It just was a different plane, a different realm to explore that we hadn't explored an awful amount of in previous volumes, and I just absolutely adored it. I definitely prefer these the volumes where they have more of a linear storyline. I've probably mentioned that before, where they've got more of a focus on moving the story forward, and there's a more of a obvious, more major plot line, and this was kind of one of them for me. The biographies at the end were so weird and so wonderful and just random. For the quote of this one, I have, "This realm is heaven's shadow, remember, or more precisely, perhaps, heaven's dark reflection, like a landscape hanging inverted in the waters above." Switching back to another little audiobook that I checked out just very randomly. This one was called Alba and the 100-Year-Old Fish and Other Stories by Lara Hawthorne, and it's read by Roshan Rakin. This was such a lovely book. It was such a great source of factual information at the end of each story, but I felt like the narrator, her tone of voice, it was in a way that didn't kind of make it an obvious distinguishable difference between the story ending and the facts. So I felt like children would still eat it up, if you know what I mean. They'd still be quite absorbed in what they were hearing, and hopefully retain those factual informations about ecosystems, the environment, all those sort of things, pollution. And yeah, also the narration was just very soothing. So very quick listen. It was like 48 minutes, not long at all, and that was a 4 out of 5 stars video. Okay, we're nearing the end of the review portion of this video. So we have Mina and the Slayers by Amy McCall. I was lucky enough to win an ARC copy in a giveaway that Amy did just before the release date. This came out on the 1st of September, and it is a sequel to Mina and the Undead, which I read last year and absolutely adored, and I adored this one too. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Obviously, I'm not going to go too much into depth, like anything spoilery, because it is a sequel. I don't want to ruin your experience, you know, blurting out stuff. But just really briefly, some thoughts that I had whilst reading this. I just absolutely felt like it was a breeze to just fall back into this world, fall into step with these characters. The characters in this is just, they're just so lovable, you know, hateable where they need to be. They just work. They're so Moorish. I also loved learning about the Slayers in this, and kind of the politics there, as well as the politics within the vampire kind of world, and also more about the detective situation going on, especially as Mina is sort of pulled between all 3 of those facets. I really need a short story of just Amand and Cafferty. I think that would be a really cool little setup, and really awkward too, but I think it could work. And one quote for this, I've omitted the name so it doesn't spoil, because it's like a murder line, it's about a murder, but it won't spoil who dies. Many people die. Anyway, so many people get involved when someone died. The person's bedroom was abuzz with activity, as if making up for the fact that she'd never move again. Alright, and the last 2 books I blitzed through in the last week of September, and they're both audiobooks. and they're both 4 stars as well, so I had quite a successful reading month, despite my little situation with that e-arc. Anyway, the first of the last 2 is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and it was read by a full cast of actors, voice actors. It felt so vibrant, so real. I feel like having a full cast really added to this experience. It was just so immersive being in there. It was like I was listening to an actual documentary of a band, which is the point, but it just felt so like I was so absorbed in it. It was so real. So I'm really glad that I did listen to the audiobook rather than picking it up. I think that's really one of the main reasons why I was more intrigued by this one, because I'm not really generally interested in Taylor Jenkins Reid as an author typically. I think I'd probably give the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo a try, but out of everything else, like, this was the one, like, I thought it sounded like it could be really cool with a full cast. It sounded like it was briefly inspired by Fleetwood Mac, so I had heard, and I just thought it sounded really cool, so I'm really glad that I did end up listening to it. The lyrics snippets that we had sounded so beautiful. It's pretty cool to actually hear random little pieces of songs that they'd just written. Like, again, it just added to that immersive, realistic experience. I feel like realism and realistic is the theme of today's video. Can you tell? So sometimes though, I did find being a large ensemble of characters, they did get lost in the ether. So some were more memorable than others. Names, if they weren't very distinguishable, I'd be like, I don't know who this person is. And I did find that after I got over the novelty of, wow, this sounds so cool, I did find my mind wandering at parts that slowed down and didn't really keep my attention an awful lot. But overall, as I say, it was a 4 out of 5 star read, a solid book, really cool experience. And I have a couple of quotes for this. I had absolutely no interest in being somebody else's muse. I am not a muse, I am the somebody. End of fucking story. Men often think they deserve a sticker for treating women like people. If she knew how often I was thinking about her, she wouldn't feel lonely. And lastly, I listened to Black and Female by Tsitsi Dangarembga, read by Chipo Chung. This was such a fantastic insight, not only into the early upbringing of the author's life, but also into the racial and sexist politics of South Africa. I felt like the collection of essays marrying with that personal kind of narrative, it just blended beautifully. It worked really well. I love it when it works so good. Cannot change the earth, a fact that leaves us with no choice but to change ourselves. And that again was a 4 out of 5 stars. So my friends, those are all the books that I read in September. Shall we quickly whiz through the October TBR? So my main focus is Black History Month in the UK, October, and also Spooky Month, Halloween time. I've got some more books catered towards that kind of season. So yeah, I've only got a couple books catering to Black History Month just because they're non-fiction, and non-fiction tends to take me a while to get through if I'm not listening to the audiobook. And then I have a couple more books that fall into the kind of Halloween-y vibe. As of now, I don't have any intent to take part in any readathons, but that might change as and when I see some that seem interesting and I want to take part, but I'm kind of just going with the flow at the minute. Okay, so I'm just going to whiz through these. Let's start with the books on race and ethnicity. So I have How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I also have a NetGalley arc of this, so that will tick off that once I get the review out. Angela Y. Davis, Women, Race and Class. Mixed or Other by Natalie Morris. And I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. And then my slightly bigger pile for the October spooky season, I have Virgo, The Art of Living Well and Finding Happiness According to Your Star Sign by Sally Kirkman. The Coldest Touch by Isabel Sterling. I think this was a Illumicrate release, no, Fairy Loot exclusive. It was like a double book box month thing. Wayward Witch by Zoraida Cordova. Hopefully I can get to this one earlier in the season, or earlier in the month, sorry, and that will finish off a trilogy for me. Sandman Volume 5, A Game of You, and Volume 6, Fables and Reflections, and that will take me up to all the editions of the Sandman that I have, and then I have to buy the next stack. And lastly, Secrets of the Witch, An Initiation into Our History and Our Wisdom by Julie Laguerre, Elsa White and Laura Perez. So that is it for this video, guys. Let me know what you've been reading during September, and I don't know what happened to my voice there, and also what you're hoping to read during October. If you're taking part in any readathons, any challenges, feel free to share with me. As I say, I'm not necessarily looking out for any, but if any looks appealing, laid back, I might give them a go. Anyway, that's it for me today. Take care, have a great day, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye.